you don't need to be giving your marriage your leftovers. You actually do have time to connect. You do have the energy to connect and work on your marriage. What's happening, though, is that you're prioritizing everything else, being the best mom, being the best employee, business owner, daughter, friend, PTA member, whatever. If that's your choice, that's cool. No judgment here. But if you're not happy with the outcome of your choices, that it's time to reflect on what you're willing to change if you want things to be different. Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's been through and still going through the trenches of motherhood myself, I get it. Life gets busy and sometimes your relationship takes a backseat. But guess what? You can feel like a couple while raising kids, and I'm here to help. Join me each week here as we dive into the messy but fulfilling world of marriage and motherhood. From navigating conflict to reigniting that spark, we're going to chat about it all. So, if you're juggling mom life with wife life, this podcast is for you. And hey, if you love what you hear, I'd be so grateful if you could rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Here's this week's episode. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. As you may have noticed, I updated the podcast cover art. I am loving this new one. I just felt like the old one wasn't quite giving off that vibe that I want this show to give off. Actually, I hired someone to do that old one, and I made this one myself. I felt very proud of it. I checked in with some friends and it totally gives off warm feelings, like I would want to have a coffee with you. I want you to feel like this podcast is something that feels like you're sitting on the couch with me and I'm just sharing, right? And we're having a conversation. And so I hope you love it. Let me know what you think. And I am super excited about it. So with that said, how are you doing? How's your week going? Today, I thought it'd be really fun to share some observations that I've made over the years since becoming a marriage coach, since doing the work on myself and being able to finally figure out what it takes to have a successful relationship. And then on top of that, having a successful relationship while being parents and raising kids. And in hopes that it will help you identify which of the three, maybe one, maybe two, maybe all three, that you see in yourself. And maybe notice, this is where I need work. This is where I need to take a look at how I'm navigating this so-called crazy life of mine and how it's impacting your marriage. Okay, so these are three things that I've noticed all of my clients, every single one of them. Okay, I've noticed that they all had this be true when they first started working with me. And these are the three things that I think you need in your marriage to take an honest look at so that you can start having the work that you put into your marriage actually have a positive impact. Because if you are doing these three things, it's likely that the energy and the effort that you're putting into your marriage today is not having the impact that you want it to have, which can create a lot of frustration, a lot of maybe even feeling hopeless, right? And I want you to have all the hope in the world. I want your marriage to be something that you are excited by, that you feel deeply fulfilled by, and that it adds joy to your life, not stress. And most importantly, I want you to understand that when you do these things, when you take a look at these three areas and really take a hard look at, I am not actually doing what my marriage needs for it to be healthy, successful, enjoyable, and then take action on it, okay? Because I firmly believe that marriage isn't hard, okay? Despite what everybody says, I don't think marriage is hard. I think that marriage has hard moments. But if your marriage feels hard in general, then we need to talk, okay? But I want to get you to the place where marriage has hard moments. Not that
it's a blanket statement that marriage is hard, okay? The whole point of you getting married was to actually add to your life. And so I want to help you get back to that place where you see marriage actually adding to your life, not becoming another source of stress, making life feel unbearable, not making it feel like it's frustrating and overwhelming, but rather, hey, I got someone in my corner, I'm in their corner, we're doing this thing together, and together we make life better. Okay? Our joint experiences are better because we're together, because we're in it with each other. All right? So here are the 3 things that all of my clients have in common. And I myself have been here too. Okay. So I'm not even talking from this place of like, oh my gosh, like I'm on a soapbox. It's like, no, this was my life. And I know that this has a negative impact on our lives as married women. And that this is like the stuff, like if I were to be like, hey, if you're going to work on 3 things, these are the 3 things. Okay. So first thing first, prioritizing everyone before yourself. That is one thing, probably the top thing that all of my clients have come to me, and that has been true. Okay. Now, if I were to be completely honest with you, I've done this twice now. Once when I first became a stepmom, and then the second time when I first had my biological son. So now they are 13 turning 14 and 7. Okay. So I completely did this. I am totally guilty of this. And this was something that I didn't see myself doing. This wasn't something that I consciously decided, like, oh yeah, I'm just going to put myself last. I'm not going to care about myself anymore. It just kind of happened, right? Like, this is where I feel like I wish women were prepared for motherhood a bit better, right? I love that there's doulas out there now. I didn't have one, but I wish that it was just a universal thing. I wish that it was a part of normal life for pregnant moms or even people planning to get pregnant to undergo some type of emotional and mental and physical support to teach them how to keep themselves a priority, how to not lose themselves in the process, because how we feel about ourselves, how well we take care of ourselves heavily impacts the rest of our relationships, the one with our kids, with our spouse, with our family, with our friends, with work. Like every single relationship that you have is affected by your relationship with yourself. Okay. Now, I took a poll in the Marriage and Motherhood Facebook community, and I asked if you were to be really, really honest with yourself, how would you rank or what order would you place the following relationships in terms of what you prioritize? Your marriage, your kids, and yourself. And majority of the moms in there basically said some variation of kids, marriage, self, or kids, self, marriage. Okay? Did you notice something there? Self was not number 1. I think one person said that. And even then, she shared a caveat that it wasn't that way before. And she learned over time that it needs to be that way. Okay, so I found that very interesting and also very telling about how we operate as women in society today and what we've been conditioned and taught from our upbringing, from our moms saying, hey, this is how we do things by being a martyr, by prioritizing being selfless and sacrificing ourselves, and essentially not taking care of themselves, not doing things for themselves, but being everything for everyone except for themselves. And, it makes sense because we bring the kids into the world and kids need a lot from us, right? It's really easy to go into that default mode of them being number 1. Okay. And if you haven't checked out episode 75 yet, I covered my opinion is when it comes to what should come first, your marriage or your kids. And I highly recommend listening to that if you haven't checked it out already. Okay. My clients, especially the moms, because I also work with couples, they come to me feeling burned out as hell and needing support to help them figure out first how to fix their marriage and also how to figure out where the energy and the time to do the work will come from and how they'll find the energy and the time to actually take care of themselves. Okay. Like I said, they are being everything to everyone except themselves, which means that they're saying yes to all the things, right? They're signing themselves up for helping all the places, whether it's their friends, family, PTA, whatever, right? Taking their kids to all sorts of things, signing up their kids for all sorts of activities and events, and they're completely overextending themselves. If this is you, no judgment. It comes from a good place, right? You're doing this because this is how you show your love, because maybe your mom showed her love by doing this, by overextending herself, by saying yes to everyone except herself. Okay. The more helpful you are, the better you appear. So it's very much like an outward thing where it's like, okay, unless I'm helping someone, I have no value in this world of mine, and that my relationships are based on what I do for other people. And what I'm asking you to do is actually flip that on its head. Instead of your relationships being based on what you do, what if it's based on who you are, who you're being? Okay? I want you to actually soak that in. What if your relationships and the quality of them could be based on not what you do, but who you are being in that relationship? Okay. Now, with that said, when you are overextending yourself, doing everything for everyone but yourself, what you're not noticing perhaps is how much it's consuming you, how often you are burned out, right? Like, how many of you have your baseline as burned out? We can get so used to feeling a certain way that we don't actually notice that our heightened levels of stress is actually our new normal. And until we experience that feeling of pure relaxation, do we then notice how stressed we are, right? Like, think about vacation version of you versus day-to-day version of you. Obviously, they're extremes. But if vacation you is vastly different than day-to-day you need to take a look at that, okay? I once had a client where her husband said, I love weekend version of her. I love vacation version of her. But during the week, to be honest, I don't really like that version of her very much. I am walking on eggshells. I'm trying to stay out of her way. And I don't know about you, but I would hate for my husband to say that about me. That would call for a big, big change in what I'm doing, because I'm not being who I want to be in my marriage. Obviously, this isn't something we plan. It's not something we strive to do, but it happens when we don't put ourselves first, when we are not a priority. Okay. And it's all a choice. Okay. You might hate me for saying this, but it needs to be said. Your burnout is a choice that you are making. You feeling strapped for time is a choice, which makes you who you become, which is burned out, stressed out, maybe you have a short fuse, you're irritable, you're unavailable for intimacy and connection, you're very serious, right? You can't take a joke. That's all a choice. You have control over that. And that starts with you taking a look at, how can I be there for myself more? How can I start making myself the top priority? How can I love myself as much as I love the people that are in my life? Okay? Because if you're not a part of that equation and you come dead last, it doesn't matter how much work you're putting into your marriage. It's not going to hit hard because you're not being who you need to be for your marriage to make progress. Okay? You can say all the right things. You can be intentional about spending time with your husband, but if you are not being the person who takes care of herself, who prioritizes herself, and notices how what you do for yourself pays off in terms of who you're being as a mom and as a wife, it's just all for a loss. Okay? Because those conversations are going to end up in a fight, no matter how prepared you are. And you connecting, you're going to end up not enjoying it because you're going to pick up on something. You're going to be extra sensitive to something he said or something he's not doing or whatever. Okay? You're not going to be that tolerant, calm, joyful, present, connected version of you that your marriage and your kids need. Okay? Second mistake I see my clients making is only giving their marriage their leftovers. Now, I love leftovers. Okay, leftovers are amazing. I actually, on purpose, cook more food at dinner time so that I can have delicious lunch the next day. Okay, because I'm not a sandwich kind of girl. I don't really do salads either. So, like, I love to just have an extra taste of dinner during lunchtime. But when it comes to leftovers in your marriage, that doesn't feel so good. Okay, that's kind of like pre-air fryer days, having fried chicken for dinner and then having it as leftovers the next day. It's like soggy. It doesn't have the same feeling, right? And the reality is that you don't need to be giving your marriage your leftovers. You actually do have time to connect. You do have the energy to connect and work on your marriage. What's happening, though, is that you're prioritizing everything else, being the best mom, being the best employee, business owner, daughter, friend, PTA member, whatever. Okay. And if that's your choice, that's cool, right? No judgment here. But if you're not happy with the outcome of your choices, that it's time to pause and reflect on what you're willing to change if you want things to be different, right? Like if you're out there wishing you felt more connected, wishing that your marriage felt better, like you were together as a team, that communication feels easy, that you're growing together, then you probably want to take a look at how much you're devoting to your marriage. Okay, if you're giving your marriage the leftovers, which is kind of like an afterthought, if you don't do leftovers like I do, which is like very much an intentional thing, it doesn't feel good. Imagine one of those situations where you happen to be with some friends and the group has plans, but you happen to be there and they're like, oh, do you want to come along? Right? And they don't sound very excited about it. It's just like, do you want to come along? You know, they never intended to have you be a part of that experience, but you're there and they don't want to be rude. That doesn't feel good. It doesn't help you feel chosen. And the same goes for your marriage. If you're giving your husband your leftovers, chances are you're not hanging out on a regular basis. And when you are, it's kind of like a chore and it comes through, right? It feels like, okay, I guess we'll do this. Okay, but just 20 minutes. Okay, like I need to be done by this time. It doesn't feel great on the receiving end. And when we're bringing that vibe into the time that you spend together, it hurts a little. That time spent together doesn't have that same impact as if it was planned, as if it was intentional time spent together, as if it's a commitment that you're making and you're delivering on it. Okay. So you wouldn't expect a plant to survive with no sunlight or water, right? And it doesn't mean that your marriage needs unlimited and so much attention, right? It doesn't need the same level of attention as your kids, but that doesn't mean it doesn't get any attention, right? Like if you completely ignore it, it's gonna be no surprise if it like falls apart, okay? And your marriage can be resilient in that it doesn't need constant attention like our kids often need, right? But to make it through, you have to still give it attention and it has to be consistent. Doesn't have to be constant, but it needs to be consistent, okay? And that's what you need to have that strong foundation to be resilient as a couple through the challenging seasons of parenthood and life, right? But If you don't have that strong foundation, then that's when it feels really rocky whenever things in your life aren't going well without the check-ins and the connection built into your normal routine. Okay? Don't give your partner your leftover. Now, I want you to remember before kids, what was the level of attention and nurture you were giving towards your marriage at that point? And then when you had kids, it like almost flipped a switch. And then you decide to have more kids, and then it becomes more difficult. Now, think about it from your spouse's standpoint. It was like, I had my wife, and then I was so excited that I decided it was a good idea to grow my family with her. And then we had kids, and then I basically lost her. Where'd she go? I don't know. Maybe, hopefully, when the kids are older, I'll get her back. But we change throughout that time. And most couples will even say that they've gotten used to not hang out so much that they forgot how to hang out. They don't know how to be in the room with each other without these buffers around the kids. Okay? And I don't want that for you. I want you to feel connected no matter what stage of motherhood you're in. Okay? Unless you're in the newborn stage, like there is absolutely ways for you to get through this to stay connected in your marriage while you're raising kids. Okay? So be honest with yourself. Are you giving your husband your leftovers? Because 9 times out of 10, there are no leftovers, right? There's things that you're filling your time with, and it just doesn't feel good for them or you. Because then you end up feeling that loneliness, that feeling where you're not on the same page. Okay. Lastly, the third thing I noticed in all my clients is that they haven't figured out how to effectively communicate with their spouse. Okay. Great communicators are not born great communicators. They are made to be great communicators. They are nurtured. They are taught. Okay. Now, if your parents didn't model healthy communication to you or allow you to express your emotions, or both, right? Then naturally, it makes sense that you're going to have a hard time with communicating unless you took it upon yourself to become a better communicator and actually went out and learned it. Okay. That was my story. Parents can't communicate. I then couldn't communicate. And I noticed that I constantly kept running into arguments, finding myself in those positions, and only to find out, oh, I suck at communicating. And so I then vowed to myself that I needed to fix this. This was something I can control. I'm going to become a better communicator. And then I noticed, wow, things are getting easier now. We're actually getting along better. We can get through conflict so much better, stronger as a team, and we can actually resolve problems together. And I didn't get shown how, right? So when you take it into your own hands, whether it's go learning it on your own or seeking out professional help from someone like a marriage coach like me, that's when things change. Okay. I was sick of getting into arguments and not understanding why it was so damn hard to understand each other and why it was so damn hard to just fix something that I thought should be an easy fix. Right? Do you ever get into those conversations where you're like, okay, this is just a little thing. I'm going to bring it up. And the next thing you know, it's like getting blown out of proportion and you end up in a huge fight. I didn't want that to be my reality. I didn't want to model that to my kids. And so I went out and did the work. And now I'm teaching you guys, okay? When you don't know how to communicate with your spouse, it makes it super difficult to grow together. That's just the honest truth. It is really hard to understand each other when you don't know how to communicate with each other. And just because you know how to communicate with other people does not mean that you're a good communicator. Okay? If you cannot communicate with your husband and you guys cannot understand each other, I don't care how good other conversations are going, something isn't getting through. Okay? Communication happens when what you are trying to communicate, what you're saying, actually gets through to the other person. So if that's not happening, you're not actually communicating. You guys are just talking. Okay? Now, when you have good communication, you are way more likely to feel like a team. But when you don't, you're going to take things personally, to not feel heard, and your partner is also not going to feel heard. And when you both don't feel heard, there isn't that safe space to actually grow your emotional intimacy together, to actually connect on a deeper level and grow as a couple. Okay. But when you do understand how communication works and have those healthy strategies down, then you can work together. You can have that safe space for you two to be honest and open with each other. And you can build on that emotional intimacy and connection. Okay. So these are the 3 things I noticed in all of my clients. So if you're like, hey, I'm a busy mom and I want a better marriage, but also I don't have all the time in the world, what do I work on? These 3 things. Okay. So quickly recap the mistakes that my clients have in common: prioritizing everyone but themselves, only giving their marriage their leftovers, and not knowing how to communicate. Okay. Which of these 3 are true for you? And of those 3, which ones are you working on? Okay. They all need to be worked on. All these are working together in order for you to have a strong foundation for your marriage. And so if you are wanting support with this, reach out. Okay. This is something that I want to see not be a thing anymore in marriages. I want the effort and the energy that you do devote into your marriage to actually pay off for you. And these 3 are the main obstacles. Okay. So book a clarity call with me if you are like, yeah, this is me to a T, and I want something more for my marriage. Then book that clarity call. Okay. It's free. You get to have my eyes on your relationship, whether it's just with you or with your husband too, so that you can finally realize what challenges you're up against and figure out what are the next steps. And then you get to learn about what coaching is like. Okay. All right. I hope you have an amazing day. Listen to this over and over and over and over again if you need to. This is the most important thing to help see your marriage improve in the most efficient way possible. All right, I will catch you back here next week. I hope you're doing well. Take care. Bye. That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. I would so appreciate that. And if you love what I share here, then you're going to love and want to join my free private Facebook community that's also called Marriage and Motherhood. I hope to see and connect with you in there. Otherwise, I'll catch you back here next week for the next episode. Bye.